Hey guys, it's Diana. Welcome to my channel, and tonight I want to talk to you about the CW's new show, In the Dark. It just aired at the time of this video this past Thursday, April 4th at 9 p.m. and it stars Perry Mattfeld as Murphy. Perry Mattfeld, you may know her from Shameless, but she stars as Murphy, who is a 20-something-year-old woman who is blind. Perry Mattfeld is a sighted actress, and as a person with a visual impairment, at first I was a little disappointed that they had gone the route of hiring an able-bodied person to play a role of someone who has a disability. However, apparently they did hire other blind and visually impaired actors, but a good portion of the blindness community is not happy with anything really having to do with the show. Let me read you the description. Blind 20-something Murphy is drifting through life in a haze of drunkenness, and her only friends are her understanding roommate Jess and Tyson, a sweet teenager she met when he saved her from a violent mugging. Murphy's life is turned upside down when, while out for a walk with her guide dog, she stumbles upon what she is certain is Tyson's lifeless body in the alley outside her apartment. When the body disappears by the time the police arrive and they don't seem inclined to investigate, Murphy clings onto the only thing that can keep her together, figuring out what happened to her friend. This main character is a depressed, self-deprecating woman who is also blind. And the trailers for this show really don't do the pilot justice. Let's just stop for a second and take a look at a clip.
No, stop it. I mean, you're messing with me. You're not really blind, right?
She is.
Why don't you look blind?
Same reason you probably don't look stupid.
Whoa!
She doesn't look stupid, Murphy.
I mean...
Okay? She's actually very attractive, all right?
Well, why would an attractive person be on a date with you?
Well, actually, I go on dates with lots of attractive people, so...
Oh, okay. I thought you didn't date much.
What? No, I don't. I'm sorry.
No?
I was just trying to prove a point that I have a lot to offer.
Okay, so, couple things to unpack here. Why don't you look blind is a constant thing that is asked, I feel like, by people who are sighted. Mainly due to ignorance. Not everybody who is blind is, dependent on other people. We've all, for the most part, received some sort of training in terms of independent living and how to travel independently and be safe and whatnot. So asking why she doesn't look blind is, I feel like, a very relatable question, and the way that Murphy fires back with probably why you don't look stupid is honestly something that I had never thought of saying to anybody in my life, but that's pretty bold, and I feel like that's fairly good writing considering that this is, a pilot episode. One of the other things that bothered me about this is that she has a guide dog. Her parents actually own a guide dog school called Chicago Guiding Hope, which apparently was originally supposed to be called Breaking Blind. I'm really glad that they changed that. So her parents own the guide dog school, and she works there. She really doesn't do anything. The pilot actually sees her get promoted to a receptionist role because their initial receptionist leaves. He gets another job offer or something. And so she ends up taking on more responsibility. But she doesn't want to work there. She hates working there. She doesn't like her guide dog. She does not want to work her guide dog. The pilot addresses the fact that she is not nice to her dog. Tyson's cousin even says so, outright, that she's not nice to her own dog. And Jess's girlfriend. There's a conversation aside with Jess and her girlfriend about, oh, why can't Murphy walk her dog? It's her dog. Because it is implied that Jess is the one who mainly takes care of Pretzel, Murphy's guide dog, who is played by Levi. And it is when Murphy is out taking Pretzel for a walk that she does discover Tyson's body. And she wouldn't have known that it was Tyson if he hadn't coerced her earlier on in the episode to feel his face.
I feel my face, man.
I just don't do that face feeling stuff. That's weird.
Now let's go back to that for a second, because for whatever reason, I feel like people in the sighted world in general want people who are blind or low vision to feel their faces or whatever. Like, I guess maybe because they think that we'll have a better understanding of how people look, but in all honesty, I don't want to be touching someone's face. Like, that's nasty. I mean, I've had people approach me with their children, and they have taken my hand to touch their child's face. So when Tyson asks Murphy if she wants to feel his face, she initially says, "I don't do that face feeling thing, that's weird," which I think is honestly a very good comeback. It's very blunt, it's to the point, and like, honestly, like I said, who feels people's faces? Like, why is that a thing that people want us to do? However, it was crucial to the plot that she felt his face, because then she wouldn't have known that it was Tyson's dead body in the alley outside her apartment. Unfortunately, when the detectives finally arrive, they comb the area and they don't find a dead body. One of the detectives, a female, asks Murphy how she knew that it was her friend, and Murphy answers something along the lines of that she felt his face and something was off and it didn't smell like him. And the woman improperly assumes that because Murphy is blind, her other senses are heightened, which is a myth that Murphy promptly dismisses and says that she's not Daredevil, and that's not true. So the other detective, who's a male, he has a daughter who's blind that he says immediately, and he tries to form this bond with Murphy because he feels like he can understand where she's coming from, and he actually believes her, like that she's not bullshitting them, even though they can't find a body. And the female detective thinks that Murphy's just a lying drunk girl, which, yeah, she's pretty drunk, but I mean, so there's that aspect of it. The following day at the guide dog school, we meet this couple who is offering a $10,000 donation to the school because I guess the wife's mother, Gail and Bradley, Gail's mother had gotten a guide dog or something, and there's this theme, at least in the pilot, in reference to guide dogs, where the writing mentions the companionship that they bring. Gail mentions how she was so grateful for the companionship that her mother's guide dog brought her in her final years. Dean, the detective, mentions that he wants to get Chloe a guide dog, Chloe, his daughter, for the companionship. I am a previous guide dog handler. My dog is retired and she is now my pet. However, while guide dogs do 100% bring companionship, there's a lot more to that. They foster independence, regardless of what some people in the community might think. Guide dogs are another tool to use to travel independently. So anyway, Gail and Bradley show up. They want to make a donation. They meet Murphy, who's like half asleep outside on a picnic table because everybody else is in the back celebrating Jake, the receptionist, who's leaving. It is implied that later, as they meet at a bar, that Bradley kind of wants to get with Murphy, as Gail has gone away on some business trip or something, I don't know. And so Murphy reluctantly goes back to his and Gail's apartment, and they're about to have an affair when Gail suddenly comes home, and Murphy hides under a glass coffee table, which is really unfortunate. Gail rightfully throws her out of the apartment with her clothes. However, Murphy's cane is still in the unit. So she finds her way outside to a hot dog vendor and asks to use his phone because her phone is constantly dead as she never charges it, calling Felix, her coworker, who always has his work calls forwarded to his personal phone because that's the only number she knows is the work phone, and he picks her up with his date, who he then circle back to the "why don't you look blind" question. So I want to make it very clear that I feel like some of the writing, at least the way that the trailers portray this show, is not the best. However, it is a CW show, and they're not necessarily known for, like, award-winning writing. However, I feel like they got the portrayal of a person who is blind down pretty well for the most part. So we learn later in that episode that Murphy actually had retinitis pigmentosa, which is a disease where you gradually lose your vision until you have none. So she lost her vision completely at the age of 14, she tells Dean, as he asked her and stumbled over the question of how she lost her vision. And he says that Chloe, his daughter, lost hers in a car accident. He tries to get Murphy and Chloe to bond with each other while he goes and talks to Murphy's parents and some of the guide dog trainers to try and get his daughter a dog, which I have another issue with because I feel like he's kind of forcing that on her. If you want a guide dog, that should be your decision. Nobody should be making that decision for you. Maybe they can like kind of nudge you in the right direction if they feel like you may benefit from one, but they shouldn't just be going and showing up to the guide dog school and trying to get a dog. Also, that's not how the process works to get a guide dog. You have to go through a lengthy application and interview process, and they have to interview references, they meaning the guide dog school. They have to come out to your home and see how you live, and that you have routes that you go and travel independently. You can't just like show up and be like, oh, I want a guide dog. Case closed. Again, a thing that is written primarily, I feel like, for the sighted audience of this show. Along that line, another thing that bothered me was the speech software on Murphy's phone and computer was fairly slow, I felt like. I believe she hasn't had any vision for, I guess, at least 10 years. I don't know how old she's supposed to be, but she's probably in her mid-20s, so maybe 10, 12, I don't know, 10, 12 years. So typically, at least judging by the people that I know who use screen reading software on their phones and computers, I do not, because I have some residual vision. The speech is typically sped up a lot, to the point where sometimes the average person who might be eavesdropping can't really understand it. That may have been another thing that the writers or the producers or whatever did, because the sighted audience, like, this is a very minor detail. It made it easier for the sighted audience to understand what she was doing. I get that. And it was implied by the Sync and Siri startup sound things that played on her phone that she had an iPhone. I don't know about her computer, like, I couldn't tell what operating system it was, but both of them used the same speech software, and she mainly just seemed to do it by dictation, by telling her phone, hey, text whoever, call whoever, and then dictating the text. Again, like, it's a very minor detail, and I'm sure that the producers and writers really don't care how accurate they get in terms of the tech things, because it was just on screen for like maybe 2 seconds. So one of the main issues here, circling back around, is that Perry Matfeld is a sighted actress playing a woman who is blind. And there have been a lot of protests involved in the blindness community regarding the decision for a sighted woman to play a blind role, when there are plenty of other actresses and actors out there who are blind and visually impaired, and I completely get where they're coming from. However, I feel like whatever the audition process was, if they did actually audition people who were blind or visually impaired, I'm not 100% sure. Someone on Twitter said they did, but I don't know. They obviously had to go with who best fit the role, which I'm not making any excuses for what they did. Like, I think it sucks. I would much rather her be played by a woman who is blind, because, like, getting more exposure for actors with disabilities, and also I feel like it would be able to be portrayed more accurately if the woman who is playing this main character were actually blind. Not to say that Perry doesn't do a good job, at least from the pilot, in playing someone who is blind. I don't know. So basically, a lot of the articles that have been out about this so far, reviewing it, I'm seeing this common theme here that Murphy, you know, we gotta love her, she is not defined by her blindness, which is great on the CW's part, in my opinion, for having a character with a disability who doesn't like define themselves solely because of their disability. The main thing here is that she is a depressed, self-deprecating, self-loathing person who admits to her mother that she doesn't even care about herself. She also happens to be blind. I don't know if her feelings are because of her losing her vision, if that's why she hates herself or whatever. Again, this was only the pilot, but we'll have to see when they air more episodes. So another thing that bothered me was Pretzel. Obviously this is not a real guide dog. The dog playing him, he's like an animal actor. So there's a scene with Murphy and her mother Joy in the car, and Joy is driving Murphy back to her apartment, even though Murphy offered to just call herself an Uber. We get the feeling that Joy is very overprotective of Murphy, and her father Hank is trying to let Murphy be herself and be more independent. But as Joy and Murphy are arguing, Pretzel is sitting on the back seat of the car in his harness, and he keeps barking throughout their argument, which, at least where I got my guide dog from, and I believe some of the other guide dog schools here in the US, they train the dog to sit on the floor in the front seat, like at your feet. So Murphy was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and theoretically she should have had Pretzel at her feet on the floor instead of sitting upright on the back seat. And he shouldn't, if he was in his working gear, he shouldn't have been barking, ideally. Again, like, it's another small detail that I don't know what they were trying to convey with it, if they just had to make it super obvious that he was also in the car with them.
Hi, this is Future Me, and I just want to point out that while the schools typically do tell you to put the dog on the floor in the front seat, everybody does their own thing once they get home, and in this case, obviously Murphy wanted to have Pretzel as far away from her as possible.
But she also ends up feeding him some table food while he is working, which I personally don't agree with. I know some people may have different opinions, but she feeds him a pepperoni from her pizza in an attempt to tell Tyson's cousin that she is being nicer to her dog. And I think she also feeds him a piece of candy or something from her bag from the drugstore. Which, going back to the drugstore, so the episode actually started out with her having a one-night stand and then going to the drugstore to get cigarettes and emergency contraceptives. When she's at the drugstore, she navigates to wherever the cigarettes and contraceptives are, grabs the boxes, and she just shuffles past everybody in the line, mumbling apologies to them and mumbling that she's sorry, she didn't see them, quote unquote, and that she's blind. And we get up to the cashier, Maria, who makes a point of saying that this is not the first time that this has happened. It is also not the first time that Murphy has gone in there to buy cigarettes and emergency contraceptives. However, when Maria tells Murphy that she cut the line, Murphy acts in mock surprise. This is one of the two instances that she is seen to kind of use her disability as a sort of crutch to get what she wants. The other instance being when she and Jess go to a cell phone carrier store and she tries to bribe and lie her way into the teenage employee tracking Tyson's phone, which she ends up doing because she offered him 20 bucks. But, you know, she just starts off with saying that she lost her phone because she's blind and kind of like plays the pity card. Which is ironic because earlier in the episode she's telling Dean not to play the pity card with Chloe and to actually like have his daughter do chores and hold her accountable for her actions and don't treat her like she's fragile, which verbatim is something that she says she wishes her parents would have done with her. I don't know, overall I thought that the episode wasn't terrible. It wasn't fantastic, but I didn't find it truly captivating. I think I'm going to try to watch next week's, I think it's called Mommy Issues or something, and maybe try to judge a little more from there. I don't know. Oh, okay. Sorry, my camera died. And this battery doesn't have a whole lot of power, so I'm gonna just leave with some closing thoughts. There's a hashtag on Twitter, #LetUsPlayUs, and it is basically the community protesting this show and how there needs to be more diversity and better representation and a better portrayal of this main character who just so happens to be blind. Nobody is in the wrong here in being upset about everything having to do with this show. These are just my opinions. I don't think that the CW did a terrible job so far. Again, there's only been one episode. I think that it was not the worst portrayal of a blind person that I've ever seen in my life. However, it also wasn't the best. But again, I feel like the more defining qualities of Murphy are her depression and her self-loathing. She's also blind, you know? I mean, we don't know why she's depressed and hates herself, but I feel like some of these things may just be blowing a bit out of proportion because the CW did hire supporting actors and actresses who are blind. There are people in the writer's room who are blind, who are being consulted on the content that this show is producing. And if people stop watching this show, that's going to hurt their careers as well. Like, don't just boycott it because the lead is a sighted actress. I'm sorry. Again, I'm not happy with it either. I think that they really could have gone another route with all of this. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what their reasoning is. I'm not the person who casts people in CW shows, but I'm glad that we're getting any form of representation at all, to be honest. This is a main character in a TV show on primetime television, and while the CW is mainly known for its superhero shows and I think Supernatural, again, it goes back to representation. I preferred it to Daredevil. It's different. It's a different take on a person who has a disability. And yeah, it might not be the best thing that's out there, and it might not be your fancy, but like, this is representation. It's some form of it. And typically when talking about representation, disabled people are almost always not included. And it's very unfortunate. So for this show to be featuring a main character who is blind, minor characters who are also blind, and to employ writers who are blind is better than I can say for a lot of other content that's out there. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I don't know, agree with them, disagree with them, whatever. You can watch In the Dark, you cannot watch In the Dark. I can't tell you what to do. But thanks for watching.